Good morning, guys. It's Mrs. Barrett. And where am I? I'm back in the library. It's so exciting to be welcoming students back to school today. And even if you're not coming back yet, I hope that you enjoy our book. Today, we are going to read about somebody named Rachel Carson. This book is called Spring After Spring: How Rachel Carson Inspired the Environmental Movement. This book is written by Stephanie Roth Sisson. It is read with the permission of Roaring Book Press. And here we go. And you got to look at the pages on this first part. Cheerily! It was dawn when the chorus began. Oh, look at all the birds she's hearing. Witchy, witchy, moo, doo-wee, chee, go, 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 Phoebe, cheer up, Phoebe, cheer-it, cheerily. Rachel didn't want to miss a note. Oh, there she is going outside. Pew, pew, caw, caw, bzzz, cheer, cheer, cheerily, tickle, tickle, woo, woo, drrrt, goo, goo. And she says, hello. As the midday sun warmed the earth, other musicians chimed in. Life and music were all around. Chirp, chirp, chee-dee, chip, buzz, beep, 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 wait, 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 buzz. And wonders big and small. You guys know what this is called that she's holding? It's a magnifying glass. It helps you see things that are teeny tiny. Jirrit-jiroo, jirry-jirry-lay. Spring was Rachel's favorite time of year. Witchity-witchity, turrily-turrily. As the sun set, she could hear the first bubbles of frog song. Crickets began their nighttime tune, and bats squeaked a lullaby. Chirp, 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 squeak. At home, there was a warm supper and a big family. Mom played the piano, and Dad sang songs and read stories. Roaring seaward and I go, rocked in the cradle of the deep. Zzz, purr. Rachel's favorites were those about the sea. As the days grew longer and warmer, the chattering, chirping, and hooting got louder. Cheep, cheep, click, chip, chip, chitty, hoot, hoot. Oh, and look, there are the foxes. Grunt. Until the gathering calls from migrating birds meant that it was autumn. They were coming together for their long journey through the ocean of air to their wintering homes. Did you guys know that birds do that? In the winter, they have to go south so that they can stay warm enough, because otherwise, if they stayed in the north where it's really cold, they would freeze. So they migrate south. Phoebe, Phoebe, cheer, cheer, cheer. Not everyone left. Look at the animals here in their burrows. The ones that are going to hibernate. Snuggled under a warm blanket, Rachel drew pictures and wrote about the life she experienced all year. She read books about animals and imagined what their lives were like. Spring after spring, year after year, the birds arrived. Every season, Rachel watched, listened, and wrote. Cheerily, bon voyage. And like the nestlings, she grew quickly. Oh, look at him. Here she is. Cheerily, hello. Look how it's like the whole year going around there. Then one autumn, it was time for her to go off to college. She was sure she wanted to be a writer until She looked through a microscope and saw a small world in a drop of water, tiny sea plants and animals. Rachel was amazed and in love. So just like with your magnifying glass, it makes things look bigger. A telescope makes them look even bigger so that she could see all this in just a drop of water. She wanted to know more about the very small world made visible by microscope. She had never been to the ocean and was scared to go in the water. To learn about the creatures in tidal pools, marshes, and the sea, Rachel decided that she would study biology. She put her writing aside. After she finished school, Rachel worked as a scientist and compiled information about the ocean. Now, for her job, she wanted to know what it was like to actually be underwater. She was still scared, but she went anyway. In the fish world, many things are told by sound waves. Rachel began to write books about the sea. They were so full of scientific detail and vivid descriptions of the lives of sea creatures that people could imagine those worlds. So she was really good at describing things so that people who weren't even scientists could understand them. Rachel became a famous author. But there was something wrong. All around, nature's voices were going quiet. So Rachel did what she did best. She watched closely, listened carefully, and learned as much as she could about what was happening. Rachel put together scattered facts and found the answer. People wanted to kill bugs that ate their plants, bothered them, and sometimes even made them sick. Chemists created new poisons to solve the insect problems that seemed to work and seemed to be harmless to other creatures and humans. These poisonous chemicals were quickly used everywhere in huge amounts because people thought they were safe. But Rachel found evidence that the poisons were not safe. Poisons were eaten by microscopic water life. Water life was eaten by tiny fish. Tiny fish were eaten by bigger fish. Bigger fish were eaten by eagles. And then eagle eggshells were so thin that they were breaking during incubation. Before the chicks even hatched, they weren't making it out. Poison coats the worms. Worms were eaten by the birds. The bird eats many worms coated in poison, and the bird dies. So maybe it would have been okay in a tiny amount, but as much as was out there, it was killing the birds. The poison coats other worms and insects. Worms and insects were eaten by the bird. The bird was eaten by a fox. The fox eats birds, mice, and other animals that have eaten the poison, and the fox dies. Rachel wrote a book to tell people what she had learned. It was a book called Silent Spring. Silent Spring created a huge ruckus. People were inspired to change, but many people didn't believe Rachel. Why are we putting them everywhere? Are they the only answer? Are you sure they're safe? Do we have to use so much? And then we had other people saying, they're perfectly safe. Trust us. They are modern chemicals for a modern world. They're the answer to our pest problems. Eventually, President Kennedy took notice and began an investigation to find out what was true. Rachel was asked to come to Washington, D.C. and defend her book. And here she is. She was scared, but she went. Rachel's testimony in Washington and her writing in Silent Spring made people see that they have an effect on the environment and that the other creatures they share the world with. People were inspired to speak up. Congress passed new laws so that nature was treated with more care, and some of the most harmful chemicals were banned. Spring after spring, year after year, people celebrate the earth and the environment because Rachel showed them how beautiful and precious it is. And look, it's like this is coming out of her book. T, Phoebe, hello. Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. But Rachel went home and continued watching and listening. In the morning, she went out among the tide pools and gathered specimens. In the afternoon, she carefully studied them and took notes on her observations. And in the evening, when the tide had gone out again, she returned each creature with great care, exactly in the spot where she found it, exactly where it belonged. Author's note. I have long loved Rachel Carson's writing, especially her books about the wonders of nature, where she writes so poetically about science. But her most famous book, Silent Spring, is hard for me to read because it's warning about what happens when people are not careful. Silent Spring is one of those rare books that changes the way a whole society thinks. In the 1950s, people thought that science could solve their problems and that nature could be controlled through chemicals. No one questioned that, except Rachel Carson. In a 1963 television interview, Rachel said, quote, "The balance of nature is built on a series of relationships between living things and their environment." Rachel knew chemicals had their place, but she asked people to slow down and look carefully at what they were doing and to understand that by affecting the tiniest creature, they were influencing the whole web of life, including humans. In the end, I realized that Silent Spring is about ecology and the wonders of nature, just like all of her other books, and I came to love it as well. Rachel died on April 14th, 1964, just 2 years after writing Silent Spring. She was 57 years old. She never saw the full impact of her work. Silent Spring led to the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency. It inspired people to try to find less harmful ways to deal with pests, and it is widely seen as the beginning of the environmental movement, which led to the creation of Earth Day, which we're celebrating this week. Rachel Carson gave a voice to nature and an awareness of people's connection to our fragile planet. However, pesticides and herbicides are still used in large quantities all over the world, and they still negatively affect many animal species as well as humans. There is still much to learn about the relationship between living things and their environment, and this knowledge is crucial to understanding climate change. Today, Rachel's writing is as important as ever. I hope you guys enjoyed learning a little bit about Rachel Carson, who started our environmental movement and our understanding of how fragile the earth is and that we need to be more careful. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Talk to you soon.